Welcome all and thank you for joining us today. Holocaust Remembrance Day, also called Yom HaShoah, was originally established by the Israeli government in 1953 as a day for the citizens of Israel to remember those murdered during the Holocaust. It is a solemn day beginning at sunset on the 27th of the Hebrew month of Nisan and ending the following evening according to the traditional Jewish custom of marking a day. Over the past decades, Yom HaShoah has become a day commemorated by Jewish communities and individuals worldwide. In cities around the globe, many gather to read aloud the names of Jews and other victims of Nazi persecution killed in the Holocaust. Our Elon community has joined this tradition to emphasize the depth of loss by reading the names of Holocaust victims from the steps of the Mosley Center. You were all invited to participate in this act of remembrance by joining us on Tuesday for the reading of the names of those who perished in the Shoah. We actually read close to 3,200 names with your support, so thank you for that. Yesterday, commemorations took place for the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And today, we want to connect and share a few moments of reflection to commemorate the lives of those who died as a result of the racial purity measures in German-controlled Europe during World War II, and will remind the public of the terrible deeds that it can be carried out when bigotry, hatred, and indifference are regarded as normal. Following the Yizkor, Elon students, faculty, and staff will be reading personal accounts of the children of Jewish victims of the Holocaust before we light candles, share personal reflections, and then end our ceremony with the mourner's Kaddish. I would also like to invite all of you at this point to check that your phones are silenced, turned off, or muted, and we'll hand over to Rabbi Green.
We begin with silence, the silence of death, the silence after destruction. There are times when songs falter, when darkness fills life, when martyrdom becomes a constellation of faith against the unrelieved black of space about us. There are no words to reach beyond the edge of night. No messenger to tell the full tale. There is only silence, the silence of Job, the silence of the 6 million, the silence of memory. Let us remember them as we link our silences. Please rise. El Malei Rachamim Shochen Bameromim Hamtze Menucha Nachona Tachat Kanfei Ashchina Bemalot Kedoshim Utorim K'zohar Rakia Mazirim Et Nishmot Kol Achenu B'nei Yisrael Anashim Nashim V'tav Shenitbechu V'shenechenekhu V'shenisrifu V'shenehergu Began Eden, Tihi Menuchatam. Ana Baal Rachamim, Mastirem Beseter Kanfecha Leolamim. Utzror Bitzror Achayim. et nishmotehem. Adonai hu nachlatam ve'anuchu ve'shalom al mishkevotehem v'nomar Amen. You may be seated.
The Holocaust, or Shoah, is the term for the murder of about 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and their collaborators during the Second World War. Between 1941 and 1945, the Nazis sought to eliminate the entire Jewish community of Europe. Jews were murdered by death squads called Einsatzgruppen or transported to extermination camps. 6 million of the 11 million European Jews perished. The Holocaust mainly occurred in Eastern Europe, in places such as Poland and Ukraine, but there were also Nazi persecutions in North African countries like Libya, Tunisia, and Algeria. The term Holocaust can also refer to the orchestrated murder of Roma. Other groups were also targeted by the Nazi regime: disabled people, Soviet prisoners of war and civilians, Polish civilians, homosexuals, socialists, communists, and trade unionists, Freemasons, and Jehovah's Witnesses. The Nazis did not act alone. Countries which were occupied by the Nazis during World War II, such as Lithuania and the Ukraine, assisted the perpetrators. To gain an understanding of the Holocaust, it's important not to look only at the acts of the perpetrators, but at the experiences of the victims, survivors, and their children. And even though it's impossible to truly understand the victims' experiences, and even though nothing can prepare us to encounter the horror of this crime, it is still important to take stock of the scope of this genocide and to understand how millions of people were deprived of humanity.
Every year, we choose to focus on one group connected to the Holocaust to create a more in-depth understanding of their particular experiences. This year, we chose to focus on the next generations, the children of survivors and their children. After experiencing the atrocities of the Holocaust, it is hard to believe that anyone would have the capability to live their life normally afterwards. Do they feel a constant search for family who may have endured? What about the yearning for the knowledge of those who perished? For the Jews who survived, many decided right away that it was their duty to continue their family's legacy. The children of the Holocaust survivors, also known as second-generation survivors, have been found to be heavily influenced by their parents' experiences of the Shoah. Straight out of war, survivors often became traumatized parents. According to Dr. Hannah Starman, when reuniting with the family was proven impossible for most post-war, the next greatest reason to survive was the creation of a new family, a concrete act to compensate for losses.
Many survivors acquainted their children with their stories of their past, not always realizing the effects this would have on their child's development. Known today as transmission of trauma, the phenomenon is a highly studied portion of the aftermath of the Holocaust. Transmission of trauma may begin the moment a child was born. Many survivors saw such a child as the replacement of their own past family, hoping the child would fill large gaps in their parents' lives. Many children were expected to undo what happened to their parents in the Holocaust, as well as satisfy their parents' yearning for lost siblings, parents, and extended family. We will recount some of their unique experiences. listen to a musical interlude by Twisted Measure, and offer personal reflections by students that participated in this year's Holocaust journey, before we light candles for all the victims that perished during the Holocaust.
The first memory we will hear is from Ruth Taubman, who is a jewelry designer working in Ann Arbor, New York, and California. She has 2 sons and 2 stepsons with her partner, Stephen Russman. She facilitated the publication of her survivor mother's memoir, My Story, and preserves the legacy of her parents, Lola and Sam, by sharing their experiences during the Holocaust. Here are some of her reflections. For as long as I can remember, my mother's screams of terror in the night were an ordinary occurrence. My siblings and I didn't ask questions. Being awakened several times a week or more was our family reality. We simply went back to sleep and didn't discuss it the next day. We certainly didn't mention my mother's night terrors to anyone outside of our family. That's probably why I forgot to forewarn my friend Jesse when he came to our house for a visit one summer when I was 16. I'd been away at Interlaken, a fine arts camp, where Jesse and I had met the year before. He came to visit me at the end of camp, and then we made the trip together back to my family's home in Birmingham, Michigan. Jesse was going to stay with us for a few days. In the middle of our first night at the house, my mother's shrieks pierced the dark. As I swam to consciousness, it clicked that Jesse would not know what was happening. I ran to his room. There, I found him standing up out of bed, shaking in utter fear of what terrible unknown event might be occurring. I tried to tell him it was nothing, and he should go back to sleep. That phrase, "it's nothing," sums up the disconnect between him, who could not imagine the origins of my mother's terror, and me, the child of a Holocaust survivor, familiar with its source.
Some stories remain untold for a long time, like that of Hella Goldfein. She remembered, "I heard my parents' silence and fulfilled the order not to ask. I nevertheless imbibed the unspoken experienced horror of my parents with my mother's milk." As an elementary school child in the 1960s, her name was Hella Fischel, and she lived with her parents in the Tillotvertel. Later, the psychoanalyst lived and worked in Munich. She recorded recollections about her childhood between Wittelsbach Park and Wittelsbach Elementary School. Her childhood fantasies surrounding the oppressive past of her parents, who survived Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, and made them available to the Jewish Culture Museum Augsburg, Swabia. Here's an excerpt from Growing Up Jewish in Augsburg by Hella Goldfein, which were in the exhibition catalog published in 2013. My mother always saw the express train to Munich, where my father's brothers had settled with their new families, as her escape route from the confines of Augsburg to the big city, where she would meet up with Jewish friends. As teenagers, my brothers and I too used to travel to Munich for Jewish parties and balls. The days of playing with the children in the street were over. A most difficult time began. We were not permitted simply to fall in love as teenagers all over the world do. After all, we were surrounded by the children of murderers and bystanders. We now had to walk a tightrope over the chasm between the venerable tradition passed on to us by our parents and the urges of young people, the emotional need to be integrated in one's environment so as to grow up leading a normal life. Children of parents who have suffered greatly have difficulties rebelling. After all, they might add fresh injury to their parents' immense burden of pain. No easy task considering the crucial role defiance plays in developing a child's personality, first between the ages of 3 and 5, and then adolescence, forming his identity and giving him tools necessary for survival. Coming of age in the 60s and 70s, when aggression and rebellion were the order of the day, children of the second generation were often afraid of, quote, being the death of their parents, unquote. We were afraid of our parents. We were afraid our parents would not be able to handle conflicts, rather. Our sense of guilt vis-a-vis the persecution our parents had endured often made us go on tiptoe, even regarding major life decisions, in order to spare them.
Thank you, Twisted Measure. This year, during winter term, we again had a group of students go on the Holocaust journey. In the vein of the Numen Lumen theme this year, in my own words, I'm going to ask 3 of them to tell about their experiences at the sites and the camps. And I'm happy to welcome Sydney Abershouse, Trevor Rao, and Natalie Schuver.
I've always struggled with the fact that I don't have a direct connection to the Holocaust. In Sunday school, my teacher asked everyone to raise their hand if they had a family member who was in the Holocaust. I looked around the room at all the hands raised and felt almost left out. I felt left out in a community where I had previously always fully belonged. I almost wished that I had a family member who was in the Holocaust, and yes, I realize how morbid that sounds. I felt disconnected. My 7th grade English class read Night by Elie Wiesel, and I was the only Jewish kid in the class. My teacher asked me if I was comfortable to share my family's Holocaust story so that the other students could learn from someone they knew personally. I had nothing to say. I went on the Holocaust Journey program not only to gain the ability to share the atrocities of the Holocaust with others, but to create my own personal connection to the Holocaust. This moment occurred in Majdanek concentration camp, about 2 hours south of Warsaw. For those of you who have not been to Majdanek, this former camp is set up like a museum. Many of the barracks are mini exhibits. Some have showers and gas chambers, some have artifacts like playing cards and prisoners' shoes, and some have informational posters. One of the posters had a big impact on me. I don't remember what it said. I paid more attention to the photo on the poster. The photo was of a necklace pendant, a pendant almost identical to the pendant around my neck. This necklace was a bat mitzvah gift that my older cousin got during her birthright trip in Israel. We don't know who made it or how long ago it was created. It's possible that this necklace was made with the necklace in the picture in mind, or it was just a coincidence. Either way, this necklace gave me the emotional connection I was searching for. Every time I see the pendant, I'm reminded of the millions of people who were murdered during the Holocaust.
I had the opportunity to journey to Holocaust sites in Austria, Germany, Hungary, and Poland, and was able to reflect on this horrific event at these sites where the unimaginable atrocities of the Holocaust occurred. Through this experience, the most valuable lesson I learned was that it is up to my generation to keep the stories of those who were victims of the Holocaust alive. Stories of their heroism, strength, and faith will be lost without my generation to continue sharing and investing time into learning about the Holocaust. My experience at Treblinka concentration camp really helped cement this idea and make it part of my moral fiber. There were nearly 1 million victims at this camp, yet there is nearly nothing that remains. The memorial at this death camp was extremely moving, as there is a massive stone that signifies a tomb that towers over the very grounds where so many lost their lives. Around this monument, there are headstones that are scattered throughout the site, representing each town where the people were sent to Treblinka. The scale of this memorial was dumbfounding and left me to wander around the grounds and collect my thoughts. In this time of reflection, I thought about how I came on this journey seeking answers on how and why this could have happened. I thought that seeing the camps firsthand could help me understand this event on a more personal level. I left and realized that my questions will never be answered, and that I will leave asking even more questions than I had before. This is what led me to realize that it is up to this next generation to continue to ask these questions so this event may never be forgotten. The little that is left of Treblinka acts as a reminder that no detail of the Holocaust should ever be forgotten.
This past January, I was given the opportunity to visit multiple concentration and death camps. In total, we went to 5: Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Majdanek, Mauthausen, and Treblinka. Each camp had a different atmosphere but shared one thing in common, and that was the fact that countless innocent lives were taken at these camps simply because they were Jewish. I grew up always knowing about the Holocaust, reading Number the Stars and Anne Frank's diary in grade school, visiting memorials and hearing speakers in middle school. And I didn't realize how unique that was until this November. We had our survivor come to Elon, and our class that was going in January sat and listened to him. Hearing from survivors is a privilege that I never got to really recognize until my roommate for the trip turned to me and said this was the first time she was seeing and hearing a survivor. I immediately knew this is why this program exists. This is why we keep educating. I never imagined learning so little about the Holocaust and never hearing stories, but I was grateful that now she had a personal story to connect to. In one class, my professor, Dr. Landsberg, said something that has stuck with me ever since. He said that this class and all the Holocaust education you can receive will never allow you to understand why it occurred. And it's true, you will never be able to comprehend and understand why millions of people suffered and were sent to their deaths because of their identity. But you owe it to them to learn about it and educate yourself and others about it and fight to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. The camp that I connected the most to was Treblinka. This was an unexpected because Treblinka was one of the only camps that had no standing structures and instead had memorial stones of different cities. As I was walking through Treblinka, I imagined the stones that had my town's name, St. Louis, written on them, or other towns nearby. And it brought me to realize that this could have happened to anyone or anywhere. One day you are living your life, and the next, everything about your life crumbles around you, at once, with no control. While walking in Treblinka, I imagined all their survivors looking down and seeing me, the next generation of Jewish people, walking through one of the worst places of their life, and I knew I wanted to make them proud. I wanted them to see me walking on the site where they died while I was wearing my Star of David necklace, learning about how Hitler's plan failed miserably, how their deaths now impacted so many lives, and how so many people like me will do everything they can to prevent deaths like theirs from ever happening again. Walking in Auschwitz, we saw a white tent over a bunk. I asked why, and the tour guide explained that the tent was preserving the bunk from weather damage so future generations could see it. This made me realize that soon some of these camps will be gone, and there will be no physical memory. This tent made me happy, which might seem out of place, but I don't think it does. I think it shows how dedicated we are to never forget what happened and make sure that others connect with the stories of the victims. We are actively taking steps toward the preservation of this terrible history. We must continue educating and having others connect with the stories of the victims and survivors and giving others the experience I had, because without it, unimaginable things could happen. Thank you.
We now invite you to commemorate the victims of the Holocaust as we light candles to remember those who perished, those who supported the victims of Nazi persecution and liberated the survivors. We light our candles by passing the light of memory and hope from one to another. Let us honor those whose lights were put out, whose dreams, hopes, and lives were snuffed out before they even lived, for the 1.5 million children.
We light a candle for the untold millions for whom there is no one to mourn, whose entire families were annihilated and who lie in unmarked graves. We light a candle for those who stood upright while others were bending to immoral will, for the righteous among the nations, who risked and even gave their lives to help their fellow human beings.
We light a candle for those brave soldiers who liberated the camps, who carried the dead and near dead in their arms to kindle a more human future for those who served with the Allied forces to put an end to tyranny and oppression.
We light a candle for nearly 6 million Jews and for 5 million non-Jews who perished in a planned system of human destruction, the scale of which had never been imagined. We light a candle for those who live even now under the yoke of oppression in places where the threat of genocide is real and ever present.
I would like to invite Rabbi Jeffrey Clausen to end our ceremony with the Mourner's Kaddish. We must remember so that it will not happen again.
You're welcome to rise and welcome to join me if you wish. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah b'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayachon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael b'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei olamaya. Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar, v'yit'aleh, v'yit'halal, shmei dekudsha brechu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiram bi'alma v'yimru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru, amen. Hoseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'yimru, amen.